What's up, man? How you feeling, Max?
I'm feeling good. Doing as well as I can after watching whatever that was on Saturday. Fortunately, it was a preseason game. Fortunately, it's just a glorified practice. But there is a lot to dislike, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, even on the defensive side of the ball. There's just a lot to dislike across the board. Take out specifically, it was just bad. It was just bad all around. But it was a preseason game. But that's what today's episode is about. We're going to dive into the offensive, defensive side of the ball. We're going to talk about some good things that we saw, some bad things that we saw, what we hope to see next week, and what we saw today at practice, and hopefully what we see at practice going forward. So I guess we'll start off with the good. This is not going to take a whole lot of minutes to talk about what we saw that went well. What did you see that went particularly well, Usayd?
I think the good is that Justin Fields made the most of whatever talent he was given with. And again, I think it's really unfair to Justin here how this whole situation's being handled, because I was driving home today and I'm like, what are we going to discuss on this show? And I'm thinking about Justin and I'm like, if you look at Fields right now, he's basically being handicapped by the Bears. And he's being handicapped in the sense that he's proven over and over again in practice, give me time and an opportunity to start with the ones. All right. But the Bears aren't giving it to him. Matt Nagy's handicapping an immensely talented player and basically saying, yeah, well, we could throw you out there with the ones, but we're not going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to stick to Andy Dalton. And I think that for Andy, I mean, he played basically the first two quarters on Saturday. And if anything, you don't even have to go back and look at the entire game. But if you just look at three of the first four possessions, man, I mean, your starting quarterback that's been in the league for 10 years, going into year 11, is going 3-and-out on three of the first four possessions. All right, cool. You had the 173-yard touchdown to Rodney Adams after getting booed. But then again, it's just like, look, every once in a while, a domino, that 73-yard touchdown, let's be honest, it was nothing special, okay? Every once in a while, a domino falls your way in the NFL, and you just so happen to luck yourself into a big play, and that's what that 73-yard touchdown was. Getting back to Justin here, though, I mean, he had let's be honest, for the second straight week, forget whatever the score was, because it wasn't his fault Buffalo gave up 41 points. I mean, he still played a really good game. The pocket presence, the mobility, the ability to just navigate the pass rush was all on display. He was making phenomenal throws. Yeah, the one shot that he had to Riley Ridley, you could argue that if this was a regular season game, it's probably being called as pass interference. But then again, it was just a really solid all-around performance by Justin. But like I said a moment or two ago, he's being handicapped by not getting an opportunity to play with the ones. And this is legitimately, at this point, it's not even a matter of the reps. It's just you're wasting time.
Yeah, the Justin Fields was a clear positive. His stat line didn't necessarily reflect how well he played. I think it was Kyle Brandt this morning on NFL Network that said, on ESPN on Get Up. He said, anyone who watched the highlights and anyone who looked at the stat line has the story wrong on Justin Fields in that preseason game. If they watched him, he was running around for his life, put some really nice dimes in the hands of receivers. Jesper Horsted, one of them. Sorry, Sam, member of the pod. Who just couldn't bring it down. He also lost the ball. I mean, he got it back where his knee was down, and he looked terrible. All in all, it was just a bad day for our 3s and 4s. It was a good day for Justin Fields. Again, it was a good day for our interior offensive and defensive linemen. Khyiris Tonga looked like a beast once again, throwing centers around. He had a wonderful game. Sam Mustipher, our guy, looked great. Alex Bars had a surprisingly well game as well. Other positives, the entire rookie class came out. It was their game for sure. If there's any conversation to be had about what group of players looked the best on the field, it was definitely the rookies. You could tell that they're playing for those positional spots in the roster. Khalil Herbert had another solid game. Daz Newsome had some pretty solid kick returns and punt returns when he was actually able to get a kick return or a punt return. We had some great showings by our undrafted free agent, Charles Snowden. He looked fantastic out there. I know you've been high on him since we signed him. He's a fantastic undrafted free agent signing. I have zero doubts he doesn't make the roster. He's an incredibly talented rusher off the edge. We all in all, Graham Tevis, excuse me. I have brain fog from COVID. I have no symptoms but brain fog. It's the weirdest thing. Graham Jr., forget his last name. I apologize. You did a great job. He looked fantastic with that interception. wasn't an interception, but great way to undercut that route. Looked like he was game day ready. He looked like CB2 just off his play because Kendall Vilder, my guy, unfortunately did not do well at the game against the Bills. So those were my studs. Those were my pluses. For negatives, I'll transition right into it. I was incredibly disappointed once again by Matt Nagy's play calling. Justin Fields gets put into the field, and he makes the best out of it. His first drive, we're moving the ball. He's looking great. He's making plays. Offensive line looks terrible. He makes a fantastic touch pass to Jesse James, shows that connection between the two. And he's basically running plays as he goes. He's can't even hear the coach in his helmet, but he's moving the ball down the field until the goal line scenario, until the red zone. We're at the 10-yard line. And what does Matt Nagy call with his infinite wisdom brain? A triple option on 2nd and goal at the 10-yard line? Are you kidding me? What way to completely strip away any form of momentum that you have going down the field, passing the ball and inside the gut handoffs, because nothing around the edge is working, because you already showed that your left side of your line is awful. Wilkinson had a terrible game, an awful game. And Latavius Simmons started every single snap like he did in week 1, and he had a terrible game too. I would like to point that out. So what do? You put him on the field, you go down the field, you get in the red zone scenario, he's ready to put that ball in the end zone, and you completely take the ball out of his hands, and you decide to run the ball, run a triple option. Oh, and then Matt Nagy's favorite red zone play, the all fade, which makes zero sense in today's NFL because you're looking for that jump man, which you don't have on that offense. Currently running your 3s and 4s, you do not have a jump man that can get up there and get that ball. Not that defenses aren't already super prepared for that anyways. I could rant about this forever. If I see Matt Nagy throw another all fade in this season, I will punch my TV because it's 2021. Stop throwing gold line fades like it's Madden 18. It doesn't work. Stop doing it. Just stop, okay? What I will say is, oh, holy cow, Dabble, you are a genius. You made Mitch Trubisky look like he was Tom Brady out there. He was looking fantastic on those amazing trip packages. There was some great motion by the Bills. That is a well-run offense. Now, I will say on Sean Desai's defense, they were running incredibly vanilla defensive packages. They weren't really moving things in the secondary. They really weren't showing any fakes or anything. It looked like they were just probing to get a really good offensive coordinator to run his stuff to see how does vanilla packages and sets work. Because if you look at the first 3 drives of Mr. Trubisky, he's looking at the right side of the field, about 6 to 7 yards past the line of scrimmage every single time. When he was on a roll and they scored the first 2 times, he was targeting the same spot on the field every time. So that tells you, Sean Desai, well, my vanilla defense package has a gaping hole right there. It's because of personnel, by the way. That's where Kyle Fuller would have went, but, he's not there anymore. But anyways, I digress. What did you see that was bad? Sorry for ranting. I just talk about Matt Nagy's bad play calling all day long. Just already seen enough. Get Bill Lazor in the headset. I've already had enough.
Well, I think you're not wrong regarding the play calling. And again, I wrote about this on Bear Report, and I'm going to have something coming out on Empire Sports Media here shortly. Probably, I think, even Tuesday morning. But it's like fans, first things first, we have to understand something is when you talk to a Bears fan and you bring up Matt Nagy, there's 2 types, right? There's the people that are going to defend Matt Nagy and the ones that are going to basically say, oh, yeah, none of it was ever Matt's fault. It was all Mitch Trubisky, and that's the end of it. Now, I think what we saw on Saturday, and I get it was just preseason, but hey, it was still a damn game. It showed that with the right coaching, you can make Mitch Trubisky look like an effective quarterback. And let's just be honest. I mean, Brian Daboll is a name that's been in the head coaching room for the last 2 seasons. He hasn't gotten a job yet, but I think he's going to get one in 2022. And he was never as hyped up as, Matt Nagy was. I mean, let's just call it how it is. I remember 2016, 2017, people talking about how, hey, the next big so take it back to 2017. After Sean McVay was hired, everyone in the NFL kind of predicted that Matt Nagy was going to be the next big name to be hired. And again, forget that. Stop using the 12 and 4 years as justification for Matt being a head coach, because that's 4 years ago at this point. We shouldn't be talking about it. All right. The 12 and 4 2018 season is very similar to older Bears fans that are basically stuck in 1985, and that's me basically throwing the entire fan base under the bus because we all deserve. I mean, the entire fan base, y'all deserve it at this point. Okay, I hate to say it, but you do. Now, getting back to Matt's play calling. Matt's play calling is an issue because in 2019, everyone said it was the quarterback. In 2020, everyone said it was the quarterback. And by the way, complete side note, but they ran two different offenses in 2020, one for Mitch Trubisky, the second for Nick Foles. So you know there were going to be two different styles and sets of play calling in terms of the schemes that they were going to run. So you never gave your playmakers to get any sort of rhythm going. And that all falls on coaching, by the way. And then in 2021, what we saw on Saturday was the play calling was shades of 2019 and 2020, but kind of to wrap up here, it was also way, way, way too predictable. And I know everyone just like, oh, stop overreacting. It's preseason. Look, Bears fans do overreact and make a bigger deal out of a lot of things, but this is one of those scenarios where you begin to ask the question, hey, is Matt Nagy legitimately the biggest issue with the Bears right now? Because great head coaches put average players in position to succeed, and great head coaches and great coaching staffs get the most out of the best players. It would be like let me put it like this. It would be like your place of your place of employment being totally dysfunctional, and then you placing the blame on someone who doesn't even have full control of the situation when you know that in fact the one person who can control the situation is your boss. That's what this whole like Matt Nagy or the quarterback kind of debate over the last couple of years has been. And quite frankly, I think it's kind of sad how we're going into year 4 with an offensive guru as the head coach, and yet there were still 10 penalties for 73 yards. There were still multiple missed assignments by the offensive line. There were times where we should have had a running back there. We ran basically, I think it was like a 1 or 2 tight end set. I mean, we ran 3-by-1s. There should have been a running back there. There should, let me put it this way. There should always be a running back there to protect the quarterback, knowing the woes that the Bears offensive line is currently experiencing. And there unfortunately wasn't. And so it just begs the question of like, what is going on? Now, moving forward, when they play Tennessee on Saturday night, the 28th, here's my thought process is hand the play calling over to Bill Lazor. One, because Matt Nagy did that 2 years ago in the Bears' 4th preseason game, and he gave Dave Ragone an opportunity to call the plays. But number 2, see what Lazor can do against or solely with the 3s and the 4s.
Yeah, I completely agree. Not even with the 3s and the 4s. I want to see what Lazor can do with Justin Fields, because like you mentioned last year, when Nagy handed off the play calling to Bill Lazor towards the middle of the second half of the 2020 season, the Bears offense was more efficient. It was just plain and simple, more efficient. Things were moving, still painfully, but they were moving, especially when Mitch was back under center. Yes, we were against some pretty low caliber defenses and talent, but we were putting the ball in the end zone. We were getting first downs. I think when we finally scored in the first quarter, even though it was like a field goal, it was when Lazor was calling and Mr. Trubisky was under center. Like it's just the truth. You can't deny that. So I want to see Bill Lazor call the entire game. And here's my thing. I want Justin Fields to start two drives. Give him the opportunity to work with the ones, show him ones in the defense, right? If you want to give him the opportunity to make up his comment that, the game isn't as fast, put him in with the ones. Let all of us see, let him see in a preseason scenario what it's like to be surrounded by talented players at the line, at the wide receiver position, and then on the defensive side of the ball. And let him experience that. The Titans have a solid group of secondaries in the starter. I want Justin Fields to have that experience and an opportunity where he can learn and he can grow, which is what preseason is. It's a dress rehearsal. So if we as Bears fans, I think, should want that, because he's not going to be put behind absolutely nobody's and get thrown around like he was and get absolutely blindsided like he was. And I will have to say, I don't know if you watched the post-game press conference with him right after the game. The very first question was, what did you see on that play? And Justin did that thing again where I absolutely love it, where he gives a play-by-play call of exactly what happened. He was like, well, I was trying to get Adams on a double route. I was trying to give him some time. I didn't really see what was going on my left side. I was just trying to give I saw the linebacker crossing on the backside. I was looking for Adams on the front side. Absolute play-by-play. Like, the dude was so locked in. And that tells you that he's not going to make that same mistake again. And he did it. There was an incredibly similar play, same scenario. He didn't make the same mistake twice. And that's what I love about Justin. So give him an opportunity to prove that he deserves to play with the ones. Today, he had some limited reps with some one wide receivers. He was throwing to Mooney. He was throwing to Robinson. That's great. We want to see that because we don't want to see him keep throwing to people who aren't going to catch his balls, aren't going to make a play on the ball, who aren't going to make this roster. So why are we even wasting our time watching the future of our franchise play with these guys? Of course, we want to protect them, but, you know, we can't protect them behind 3 and 4s in the offensive line, regardless of who's playing. He is going to be hit, so might as well have the most protection you could possibly give him. And as you mentioned, with having a running back in the backfield, this offense isn't designed for that. Our running backs aren't designed for that. There's one big body back, and it's David Montgomery, and even he's pretty bad at blocking in the backfield. He's proven that in the past 2 years. So Justin is going to be running for his life regardless this year. Hopefully next year we bring in some more offensive talent at the line specifically. But also, I'm also kind of upset with this whole narrative that the Bears offensive line is the worst line in the NFL. It's not true. There are much worse lines in this league. We just have to look at the injury list. It's incredibly long. The guys who I know will start day one, who are good, like genuinely good offensive linemen, just aren't there. So I'm not down with this whole Bears have the worst offensive lines narrative. I'm not saying that because I'm a biased Bears fan. I'm saying that because as a guy who played offensive line, as a guy who studies offensive line, we don't objectively have the worst offensive line in football. Jason Peters, if he could prove that he's got the gas, he's got the gas. He's a great option there. Larry Borum got thrown around a couple plays, but he genuinely looked pretty good for a guy that got limited reps because of an injury and a concussion. He looked solid. I'm excited to see how he looks next week with some more reps. So I think this might be a one-off that we see Justin Fields run around like this. I'm hoping. But I still don't think he should start week 1, but I want to see him start this next preseason game because I want to see him get some 1 reps.
Okay, so a couple things here. Number one, Larry Borum did actually look really good. I think there's only 1 rep that I looked at in the 4th quarter where he was beaten by his guy. That's about it. So maybe this is a silver lining here where Borum kind of excels playing left tackle, and then that kind of forces the Bears to basically move Jenkins back to the right side, which would be his more natural position anyway. But I also think, when you talk about the running back here, I mean, the reason I said that there needs to be a running back there kind of protecting the quarterback is simply because let's just call it how it is. I mean, this is an offense. Look, this offense isn't necessarily predicated on always having a running back there to provide like max protection or anything. But for the situation that the Bears are currently in, you do have to consider throwing one back there specifically because you have to do whatever you can to minimize any holes. And let's just be honest. I mean, this is an offensive staff that really hasn't done that. And also, you brought up another intriguing point. I mean, everyone was talking about how the Bears were basically being beat up the middle and, the defense sucks and the linebackers are a tad bit too slow. Let's just be honest, okay? Roquan Smith was not playing. And Roquan, I think, look, Roquan Smith not playing in this game was a bigger factor than people realize because that first touchdown does not happen if Roquan Smith's in the game. I don't care that Robert Quinn just completely mistimed a block. Roquan Smith was playing really, if Roquan was playing, that would not have been a touchdown. There were so many outside runs to the edge that Buffalo had that you're like, okay, if Roquan Smith was here, those runs would not be the 10, 12-yard gains that they were. They would be shut down very easily. And so more so what this game showed was just how important Roquan Smith was or is to the Bears defense. But it also kind of showed that, Christian Jones and Alec Ogletree, while they're great and they've had their flashes, they are not going to be as good as some fans are hyping them up to be.
Yeah, I can't talk about how important Roquan Smith is to this defense because of just how much talent he brings. Every time he's off the field, the defense looks considerably worse just because of the presence he brings in the passing game by clogging up that middle. Because offenses respect his sideline-to-sideline speed so much that they refuse to throw easy middle slant and in routes because they're afraid of Roquan picking it off. He's proven multiple times that he will take those passes or he will break them up, that he is just as fast as your tight end and even as fast as some of your running backs. So you cannot stress the importance of him in any red zone scenario enough, or even just in any drive in the middle of the field and plugging that hole. When he was injured when he wasn't playing the wild card game against the Saints used that to their advantage and picked apart the middle of the field. If Roquan Smith wasn't there, could have been a different story. So I completely agree with you there. Even with the ones, they weren't going full speed. It was very clear. There were multiple plays where it looked like they were kind of jogging, and I don't blame them. That's just them kind of getting their bodies into the motion, get some of that muscle memory going. It's not a real game. They don't need to get hurt. There's already enough injuries on the ones they know. So I don't blame them for doing that at all. But what I want to see is more effort out of guys like Riley Ridley. Like, I want to see him jump up for that ball. He needs to go up for that ball. If he wants a spot on the roster, he's going to have to. Because guess what? This guy named Ronnie Adams that just busted your butt. He came out of nowhere. Your spot on this roster isn't safe anymore. There are enough talented wide receivers on this roster that will gladly take your spot because you decided not to jump up for a ball like Rodney Adams did. And that was a catch. That's like Rodney Adams' second catch, like right over the head of the defender, right? Those were two catches that Allen Robinson couldn't make last year. Like, put them side by side. They're the same exact catches that Allen Robinson couldn't bring down. So whatever Rodney Adams is doing in the gym, maybe A-Rob needs to for whatever his future team is. And I will say, again, I put out this tweet because I was watching on the broadcast. I wasn't there. Somebody corrected me who was at the game. But it looked like Allen Robinson was giving shit to Matt Nagy, like arguing with him, because it looked like Nagy was like shaking his head and he was like pointing at something. I guess he was nodding his head. My bad. But the fact that A-Rob was up there talking to the head coach about something when the offense was on the field is, a pretty good sign. The relationship might not be as bad as we think, but I still don't think he's coming back. But that's for a different episode. Looking ahead at, again, last preseason game against the Tennessee Titans and their incredibly talented offensive core, what we want to see is, and what to expect, is some more complex defensive scheming from Sean Desai as he irons out his new defensive scheme. You won't be looking at the same easy cover 3 sets that he was throwing against Mr. Trubisky. Expect some of that stuff. Expect Khyiris Tonga as a start, or at least take some reps with the ones, because I think they're seriously considering throwing him up there pretty soon. Akeem Hicks is slowing down. We might have already found a replacement if we decide to get rid of him. Expect a lot more time out of your starters, obviously. But this will be a fun game to watch because the Titans are just good. They're just a good team. They're one of my teams to watch in the AFC, and deservedly so. So what are you expecting? Oh, and hopefully the special teams does better. I've never had to worry about our special team as a Chicago Bears fan. This feels incredibly weird that our special team is garbage. But who knows? Maybe it's preseason. We'll just put it on that, right? And hopefully we see better next week. But specifically, what are you looking forward to as we square off against the Titans?
Yeah, well, and again, you alluded to this earlier, but I'm going to bring it back. I think an underrated storyline that no one necessarily is even talking about is the fact that the Bears rookie class outside of Tevin Jenkins is looking really good in preseason. And, again, I said this at the start of the preseason and the start of training camp. I'm going to say it again. There is absolutely zero reason for you to be keeping an eye on a guy like a Khalil Mack or Roquan Smith or Eddie Jackson or Allen Robinson. And why? Because if you take the 90-man roster the very first day of camp and you decide to highlight a whole bunch of names, you're going to be highlighting the names that are making this roster and are pretty much guaranteed a roster spot. The question then becomes like, okay, what are you doing afterwards? And so for me, really seeing what this rookie class is able to do is the biggest thing that I'm watching for against Tennessee. And also, side note, I know Jalen Johnson gave up a touchdown and there were 1 or 2 times where he got beat, but let's just be honest about something. I mean, Jalen's confidence and his swagger, I think it's very apparent and it's on display going into year 2. And so we have to keep in mind is that this defense was not going at full speed by any means. And so what we've seen from Jalen so far has been incredibly limited in terms of what he's going to eventually develop into. Just throwing that out there for anyone that's saying, oh, Jalen Johnson got beat. Because I tweeted this, I'm like, no, like Jalen's this confidence is definitely there. Just watch and wait till it shows in the regular season. But then overall, you just look at it. I mean, another thing I'm watching for is what are these young outside linebackers do? You look at Jeremiah Itachi, who, by the way, the only reason he's here is because he spent 2 years with Vic Fangio in Denver. And so it was more of a, hey, you're familiar with the scheme fit. than more so of just we're signing you because we need a legitimate veteran present in the room. Travis Gibson's also looked good. I think that Charles Snowden has looked phenomenal over the last couple of days, and all of a sudden, a group that a lot of people thought was going to be good or just mediocre, because we know what Khalil Mack is. But then you had questions with Robert Quinn. And now what's happening is I think Atachu, Snowden, Gibson are looking good enough to the point where you could make a serious argument that Robert Quinn's role this year is going to be so limited where it might just be like early first and second passing downs.
Yeah, I mean, he came out and said that he's not an outside linebacker. He's naturally a defensive end, and that's been an issue for him since he got here, which again raises eyebrows about that contract. Maybe there's a way that they put him on the line. They put him more in an interior lineman role than outside linebacker. If a player tells you that I'm better at this role and keeps getting hurt and really sucks it up at the other role, maybe that's a sign that you should probably move him into where he wants to play, especially when you're paying him that much money. But that's besides the point. No, yeah, I mean, you're completely right. The rookies have looked absolutely fantastic, and I tweeted it out. I said it again earlier today, and I'll keep saying it out. And I'm sure they'll look great. Next week, we have a plethora of talent at that outside linebacker position, at that interior defensive line position. Things look genuinely good. And on Jalen Johnson, the very first play of the game, Mitch Trubisky targeted him, and I think it was Cole Beasley that was on him, and Jalen Johnson smothered him, didn't let that pass get near him, completely broke it up. And Mitch Trubisky didn't look that way for the next 3 drives. I'm like, if you go look at the tape, you'll see it. He refuses to look to his left side of his body for a long time because he knew Jalen Johnson was there. And then eventually as the game kind of progressed, yada, yada, yada. But for right off the bat, Jalen Johnson got into Mitch's head and was like, no, you're not going to throw this way. And he didn't. Kendall Wilder got beat a lot. Like I said this over the summer, and I said if there is an issue for Kendall Wilder, it's going to be the man-to-man press coverage. He needs to get better at that. He's a really good zone. But when it comes to man-to-man press, he will get beat. He put a lot of work in the offseason on that. Hopefully he continues to get better. He looked good at practice today. There were some good videos on one-to-ones that he looked great. Maybe he learns a few tricks. We'll see against some of that incredibly talented Titans wide receiver core that they put around Ryan Tannehill. But, before we wrap this up, I do want to say for Mitch Trubisky, he needs to keep doing this. And I love this for him because I really do think he's going to have a Ryan Tannehill type career. I think he's going to go wherever Brian Daboll goes. I really do. And I think he's going to be brought on as maybe QB1 in whatever team Brian ends up at. And I think that he's going to have a career resurrecting year. I think people are going to look at him like a Ryan Tannehill because they're very similar tangibles, by the way. I think if you just put him in a right scenario to flourish, he will flourish. And I think he deserves that. He's a solidly talented quarterback with just an inability to read a defense. But if you put him in an offense that you don't need to read the defense because it's just that good, he's going to be great. So good job, Mitch. Love you. No hate here. Always nothing but support because guess what? You exposed Matt Nagy to a lot of fans for the first time as a fraud. And good job. So not that he's a fraud in other aspects of the game, just at some of his offensive scheming and getting players ready for game time. It just seems like they don't scheme well and plan well. But preseason, we'll get into it in the regular season. Stick with us. Of course, we'll put out more regular season previews. But anyways, that's it for me.
Honestly, knowing the Bears' luck and Matt Nagy's luck as well as Mitch Trubisky's luck, Dable's going to go to a new team. Well, first, let me take a step back and say this, is that Bills GM Brandon Beane pretty much admitted that they knew when they were signing Trubisky to the 1 year, $2.5 million deal, they knew for both sides it was just a short-term thing. And Dable, wherever he goes next year, and I'm not going to throw any teams out there because, again, it's kind of way too early to tell. What's going to happen is he's probably going to end up bringing Mitch with him because what better way to kind of jumpstart a rebuild or a retool of a team than bring along a quarterback that you've been working with for a year already. And also knowing that the Bears look, like I alluded to a moment ago, Dable's going to go to some new team. He's going to absolutely light it up with Mitch Trubisky. And then Dable and Trubisky are going to win a Super Bowl before the Bears win one with Matt Nagy and Justin Fields. Or Justin Fields and Matt Nagy are going to meet the Dable and Trubisky in the Super Bowl. Let's just call it how it is. That's probably a likely scenario that's going to happen, but that's going to do it from us, guys. Make sure you're following myself and Max on Twitter at Usayd Kolshan, at Max Smith ESM. Follow Fireside Bears on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. We'll be back here over the next couple days, guys, probably with a new video. We will see. And then as the season kind of progresses and our schedules normalize, because we're both working day jobs now, so it kind of feels normal. We're going to be doing this in the evening, probably like 2 times a week. But until then, bear down, stay safe, don't make any bad play calls, and we'll see you in a couple days here, guys.
Good luck on your fantasy drafts.